Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to twitch.tv/ESPN Esports. We are talking all things Valorant. A very busy week, whether it's the patch notes, the game being updated, a possible new map, big changes in competitive organizations, signing new players, marquee players from different esports. We have a lot to digest. I'm Arda Ocal. We got Emily Rand, and we got David Simo Rabinovich with us as well. David, fresh off of commentating our ESPN Esports Valorant Invitational, which was won surprisingly by Team Canyon. That was definitely not predicted by a lot of people, Simo. But here we are. It's the Apex Legends boys that are reigning supreme. Were you surprised by that?
You know, you think that Team Mirage came in, they had a lot of strats patented out by the previous invitationals that they attended, but Team Canyon proved that they took the practice to the court and they were able to come out on top, and good for them. Good for them.
What do you think, Emily? Were you surprised?
I was like pleasantly surprised, I guess, because I mean, previously we identified Team Canyon as the only the only other team that we saw having a shot at winning this tournament outside of the developers and all of the former CS:GO pros. I think that the big thing that I saw from the Apex Legends players that was really interesting is how they adapted from day to day, especially since Dizzy played so much Raze on their first day of competition.
Oh, yeah.
And then swapped to the Breach, which he looked not great on in their first few matches, and then was like significantly better on by the end of the day. So just to see that kind of like comfort level change within the course of a day is always like super interesting. And I think it was really cool how they obviously adapted, and also just their team coordination and synergy by the end of the tournament was a lot better than when they started.
I think it was Tyler at Fion on Fire on Twitter that wrote in our Slack chat. He said Dizzy basically went from trash tier to god tier in an hour on a new character in a tournament.
I mean, I wouldn't say trash tier, but his Breach wasn't great when he first started, and it was really good by the end of the day.
So we're going to talk a lot about the big moves and signings that have happened a little bit later on. That's going to come later in the program. Let's start with the patch notes and also Valorant competitive. Now, we were expecting to receive a ranked mode today, but Valorant tweeted a few hours ago this: for those asking for rank to be turned on, not today, sorry. We're evaluating on a day-to-day basis based on server stability and competitive integrity of the queues. Examples, no uncounterable exploits. Today is not that day. We'll let you know tomorrow. Now, I appreciate the openness. And to be fair, the developers have been very open with communication thus far in the closed beta. Do you think that this is going to be an elongated process? Do you think maybe we'll get ranked tomorrow or next week? And do you care? How much does it matter to you that we get it as soon as possible, Emily?
So I think that they'll definitely try to enable ranked as soon as possible when they think that they can. I know like some people are still having massive connectivity issues. For example, all of the games I played yesterday were 4v5. Unfortunately, they were 4v5 for our opponents. But even as like the 5, that still feels really bad, right? And obviously people are continuing to drop off the server at times. They've still had a few server issues since the previous patch. So I think it's a good idea to delay ranked until they can make sure that they won't have significantly more issues when it is enabled. As for whether it's like good or bad, I mean, I always think it's good when something's delayed if it's not ready to be launched. When ranked does go live, I think it'll be really nice for matchmaking. I know, like for me as a player, like as a casual player, it's always going to be really hard for me to queue up because A, I'm really bad. B, I'm a woman, and this voice chat is actually super important in this. So I don't know how much like ranked is going to affect me because I'm probably only going to be playing with friends, to be quite honest. But I think it's really, really good to establish a ranked system, not only for players that we're going to talk about swapping from other games later on in this, but for people who are new and are just coming out. Like I've said this on previous shows, and I'll reiterate it later and here now. I think the future of Valorant is in people that we probably don't even know yet, and ranked is going to significantly help with scouting those people, right? So that's where I think ranked has a really good value, in addition to, you know, improved quality of life for matchmaking and that kind of stuff that naturally will come with it.
Let's talk about some of the patch notes. A lot of it was relatively minor, but there were some interesting points in there, Simo. When you take a look at this, why don't we highlight maybe one or two things that really stuck out for you from the patch notes?
One of the main things I feel like is a lot of people have been putting Cypher in kind of the S tier of agents, considering how useful his utility is when it comes to scouting out the opposition. They've recently made a change where the Cypher camera blinks now when it is active by the Cypher that is using it. It's a green light that is blinking for allies, so it signifies, okay, this is a team camera, this is not an enemy camera, and it's red if it's an opposing Cypher's spy cam. So I think that can be very useful. And little changes like that can really change the pace of a game potentially, knowing that, okay, I can now push in, maybe it's not blinking, maybe I can sneak by or something like that, and that indication can now help out as well. In addition to Omen, now it's a little bit easier to tell when he comes out from the shadows, and from there, I mean, to Omen players, it might feel like a little bit of a nerf, because now it's like, well, the element of surprise is missing, but it still needed to be a little bit more clear for especially the newer players that might be coming in after the closed beta when the game launches, to tell, okay, Omen's in, I can take him down now, and I can have a 4v5 advantage for my team.
That's an important one. Also, Sage with the barrier orb, Emily. That's a big one as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think like we were talking about this before we went live, but Sage is like the crux of every team composition, right? Like by design, like she is going to be in every comp, and I actually don't mind that. Like I don't know what the developers think, but I honestly don't mind that she's a necessary component. It does mean that balancing her is really tricky without like changing her entire kit. And so balance is typically going to come from stuff like this, where you notice that if you can put a barrier on like every single little tiny piece, and you're boosting everyone to like, places that the developers didn't necessarily anticipate, that is, a bit overtuned, and therefore I actually do like that update a lot. And I think it's a really good example of the value of a beta in and of itself, right? Because an agent like Sage is always going to be a bit trickier to tweak, just based on the way her kit's designed.
I think that a lot of people have figured out special peaks to get an advantage with the barrier orb, and one that has been fixed with the patch is at Haven at the double doors. There's a curtain now, so that you can't create the barrier orb and then just peek at the sliver right at the top to be able to see. This is some of the more visual changes here. You'll notice that hue of green, teal, turquoise, whatever you want to call it. That's really like the color of Valorant, right? Like that's like the primary color of Valorant. So you're going to see that a lot. And you're also going to see that color in some of the character updates as well. Omen and Breach now have that color incorporated into their kits. But I think it looks nice. I think that when you have a primary color like that differentiating, there's Breach right there. I think that is a positive for a game from like a memory standpoint, from a identification standpoint, Simo.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the main, at least important things I've heard from a few CS, analysts and commentators and players, is that as long as they don't create a big difference in the actual character model itself, like if you refer back to Overwatch, Reinhardt is way bigger than Mei, of course. As long as the models themselves remain relatively the same size, they can keep it on brand as much as possible, and everyone will still follow suit. And like you said, it still will help with that memory thing, but as long as the models themselves don't change too drastically in terms of size, they can change them as much as they want.
What about the Omen lines on the face too? Like we're going to get to that in a second. He has the creepiest lines in the game, by the way. Right? Like Cypher, have you seen under my hood? Does it scare you? Like where'd that come from? What on earth is that?
Listen, Omen has a dark past, you don't know where he's coming from. Right?
Some of these voice lines I just like crack up all the time when people are spamming them, just generally.
Another thing I do want to mention really quick about the patch notes is the observer mode. So there were a few things added to the observer mode, and these are minor things. Like maybe some of you watching won't even ever use the observer mode, but there are some quality of life improvements that were made to that mode, which will make tournament viewing a lot better, Simo, right? You've done a lot of Valorant tournaments right now. You've experienced observer mode. So when you see improvements coming from that aspect, that's very bright. That's very encouraging.
Yeah, especially considering it's still a closed beta. There's still kinks to iron out across the board, even observing mode or not. Some of the changes I think are still good, but there's a long way to go for it to be perfect. I think what they incorporated for us to start, switching between players as well as the free cam to allow some of the montages that you may have seen. I think Team Liquid released a montage that has some cool little neat angles. We had some of them during the ESPN Esports Valorant Invitational, but there's still, I think, a lot more to be added in order for, I think, even the devs to be happy with the place that they want the observer mode to be in.
So, I mean, this is just one of many. I'm sure that we're going to get a lot more patch notes in the near future, but so far, so good. And again, the communication has been incredible. So, props to the Valorant team, particularly the designers, the producers that are putting out these patch notes, and the communications team that worked on this. I believe the gentleman's name was Jeff Landa, communications associate. So, Jeff, thank you for this. Appreciate the details there. And we did put the link in the chat.